So we have a lot to talk about with this episode because you had made a comment in our previous episode about Picard when we were talking about...
We're talking about a lot of things, apparently.
Well...
You talked about this episode when we were talking about Picard. You made a comment.
Well, you made a comment about how it's a lot of talking. You know, when two characters talk to each other, it's just boring when they do it in Picard.
Right.
And you had said that it was riveting in this one, in this particular episode. So,
are we agreeing to disagree on that?
We haven't agreed to disagree about anything.
Ever. That's true.
Ever. I will never agree to disagree. It sounds very unproductive. But as you know, this is the measure of an episode.
Oh.
Where it is our continuing mission to explore what makes Star Trek genuine Star Trek and not just
courtroom drama.
I was going to say law and order.
Right.
But anyway, I'm Paul.
And I'm Jonathan. And we do this with 3 criteria. The first one is there sci-fi that is explored within the story? Is that sci-fi presented in a unique or novel fashion? And is there a character who faces an ethical or moral dilemma? I am Jonathan.
And I'm Paul. And this week we watched Strange New Worlds, Season 2, Episode 2, Ad Astra per Aspera. And that title means nothing.
That's right. The cat jumped up onto the keyboard, and they're like, no.
Yeah.
Why'd you hit submit,
happened to
cat?
write that.
Yep.
I did not like this episode. Oh, sorry. The blurb is Captain Pike goes on vacation.
And this is what he did on vacation, right?
And this is what no, it's not. This is not what he did on vacation because I thought this is going to be a contemporaneous episode like we had predicted and hoped for.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, maybe they're going to make this very interesting.
And it started that way.
Kind of.
Well, it showed him on vacation, and he was like, I'm not leaving, and he got the lawyer, and then we were back on the ship.
Right.
Yep.
And nobody talked about, hey, we just had this really interesting encounter.
That would have been so great if he asked Spock, like, did anything exciting happen while I was gone? And Spock said something like, nothing of note, or something like that.
Yeah, it'd be great. It'd be great.
Or La'an, right? Like, just a quick Pike, like, La'an says, oh, or, you know, Pike says to La'an, oh, you're back. And she's like, yeah, I'm back. Because she wasn't there at the end of the last episode.
He's like, I got to read more of the memos. I'm just way behind.
Yeah.
Okay. So this show, let's get.
Do you want the blurb or no?
Yeah, give me the blurb.
All right. So Commander Una faces court-martial along with possible imprisonment and dishonorable dismissal from Starfleet, and her defense is in the hands of a lawyer who's also a childhood friend with whom she had a terrible falling out. There you go.
Okay. So now it's coming at us at all. And so we have the title, which is Ad Astra per Aspera, means to the stars through difficulty or through hardship.
Yep.
I understand that's the thematic of the show, right? To the stars is an allegory. A lot of allegories in this show, as you may have noticed.
Oh, really? We'll have to talk about that. Break that down.
Yeah.
Hear your thoughts.
I'll spell it out for you. It was very subtle. Very subtle.
Yes.
I had to watch it 3 or 4 times to really
Please spell it out for me, since they did not.
Yeah. Let's start with broad strokes. Okay.
Okay.
And why I hated this episode.
Wow.
The first thing
all right.
is the same complaint that we have about Una throughout the entire first season and so far this season, which is, why do we care about this character?
Besides that she is, right. Yeah.
She's the first officer, but she's had minimal in terms of knowing who she is. She's on trial. And she's on trial not only as a Federation officer or as a Starfleet officer, but also just as a person, which we learn, right? And they set up that whole flashback at the beginning, which I was almost tired of. They're doing a lot of flashbacks.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a Picard thing too, where they're trying to give us non-contextual little vignettes that pay off later. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's stale to me. I'm tired of it.
Again,
I'm tired of seeing characters when they were kids.
Well,
you know?
Yeah, and I'm fine with seeing the characters as kids, but I'm tired of kind of what you said, seeing it as like trying to make it the hook, or to elicit some intrigue, like something that we talked about outside of the podcast, but applies here too. When she talks about her childhood, that's when you do the flashback, and you can even do voiceover for it. Just to make it a little bit more interesting, instead of showing that moment at the beginning and then revealing what all that was about.
Yeah. It just didn't land. It doesn't have the emotional impact. I mean, I think the whole episode does not have the emotional impact they want it to, or the writers wanted it to on us. Because, again, with the broad strokes, God, I'm so a Twitter right now. I'm so upset and angry at this episode.
Clearly.
Because, well, think about it. I mean, did you care at all when they were doing all of this? Like, so they get on the stand. I'm going to pass all the stuff where they try and convince the civil rights lawyer to take her case. She doesn't want to take the case because she's mad at her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we learn that she may have taken the case because she wanted a platform and didn't really care about Una going to jail for 20 years, which would have been a super dick move, by the way. It's like, no, you should not take the deal. Don't take the deal. We're going to fight this. And then she's like, I don't really care about the deal. You can go to jail for 20 years. Just go to jail. As long as you get my 30-second speech, we're golden.
Yeah, as long as I've got my soapbox, like I don't care what happens to you.
Right.
Yeah. You are the martyr for the greater cause.
And this is the thing that maybe pisses you off too, which is we know you're going to take the case because you're in the episode. They wouldn't have dedicated 15 minutes of the episode to you if you don't ultimately take the case. Oh my gosh. So why are we spending so much time going back and forth that you're not going to take the case? Just take the case.
That would be amazing. And then they wind up getting like a second tier lawyer. Like they spend, those first 10 minutes with that person. And then like, just as kind of a Chekhov's gun thing, like it's just going to be frustrating if she was never actually in the episode. They use her later as either like, I've been like binging SVU. Why do I not know this? The informed witness, the expert witness. There we go. Either as an expert witness or as a consultant to get the information that they need. But yeah, to like have the opener be like, no, I'm not taking the case. No, I'm not taking the case. And then Pike comes in with another person. He's like, she didn't take the case.
I love that. That would be great. That would have been great. Or like, nuh-uh. She takes the case. Yeah. That whole thing with her, by the way, where she goes, it's this kind of creepy scene where she comes up to, I actually forget the name of the lawyer. Stacy.
Let's call her Barba.
Okay. She comes in. It's like, I may have some evidence that perhaps the person who turned Una in did so illegally. And I was like, oh, this is going to be the B plot. Enter the B plot,
right?
Where encounters and stumbles upon some grand conspiracy against not only Una, but Pike and the entire Enterprise. And now they have a foe. They have a leak on the Enterprise. They don't know who it is. And this is going to span 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 episodes where we don't know who they are. But guess what?
Nope, they didn't do that.
No, they didn't do that. No, it was just she's like, do you have the information? He's like, no, I don't have the information. I'll go ask a friend if she can get it for me. And she said no. So we're back to square one. But I'm pretty sure there's got to be something out there, right? That was the extent of the B plot.
Yeah, it would have been nice if there was more investigation and not just, yeah, I tried and I came up with nothing.
Well, or have her come up with something. That would have been good. Let there be a reason that you're including her.
I guess, but then it would be completely unrelated. It's like, we found this mole, and Una's like, oh, because I confessed too.
Yeah, just takes the folder on top of her desk and slides it underneath when she comes out as the person.
Right.
Never mind.
She's like, we had this mole. It's going to bust this case wide open.
Yeah. So anyway, that whole B plot that never was really pissed me off because that to me was going to be the interesting part, and nothing ever came from it.
Her name is Nira, by the way.
Nira,
yeah.
Okay.
Not Kira, Nira.
Okay, that'd have been funny if Kira did it. I mean, I understand that Singh, that's her last name.
Nunyan Singh is her first.
Onion Singh.
Nunyan.
Okay.
Singing Onion.
She obviously has something in common with Una a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's some kinship there, but they never really talk. They never really share that together. I don't remember if they do anything like that in the first season, but again, I don't care about Una. And I don't know if I just don't care about her, even though they've given me enough story to care about her. I just don't. I mean, it seems like in the first season, all she was doing was sort of being an ear for Pike, but not really important at all. It's very strange that this was the second episode of season 2. That this was where Pike was going.
Yeah, well, and I understand why it's the second episode, but it is frustrating that she was arrested in the season finale. I mean, it's kind of the Borg thing with Best of Both Worlds, you know, where Una gets arrested at the end of season 1, but she's back by the second episode of season 2.
Yeah, if she was like an undercover Borg, I'm on board with that. I like the idea of they're just shitty undercover Borg where they just put the jersey over their Borg outfit.
Right.
They're trying to walk around.
Yeah,
What do you
wearing
mean?
sunglasses.
I'm not Borg.
We are not Borg.
Oh, yep. So there's this point in the trial where I thought it was going to be a very interesting montage, a la Amistad. Remember that movie?
Yeah.
There's a very interesting, that's kind of a courtroom drama as well for part of it. And there's this part where it's not just witness after witness after witness. It's kind of many witnesses being questioned, kind of chop it up, where you'll hear from Spock and then you'll hear from the doctor and then back Spock again, you know, all that kind of stuff.
And yeah.
It was kind of like interesting, like the camera's moving. We're like, oh, we got some momentum here. And it just turned out to be this gushy scene where every time they say something nice to Una or about Una, they turn to her. And I started to get this vibe of like a 90s feel-good movie where they were dicks to her the whole movie, you know?
Right.
And then they finally came around when it was time to testify against her. And they're like, she's actually one of the best people I've ever met. And then she turned, like, they didn't earn that. Like, they're always nice to her. Like, why? This is not news to anybody.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I do think that a big part of this is your general feelings toward Una. Like, I agree with you to a certain extent that they haven't really provided enough for her. But I feel like if they did an episode where they were providing more, you would still be complaining about how nobody cares about her. So why are we spending so much time on her?
Yeah, well, now it's just fun.
Right. To take a number 2 on number 1.
Yeah. Nice. That's going to be one of our t-shirts. If you want that t-shirt, please send us an email. By the way, as a little side note, because I always forget to do this, we would very much like you to share this episode. If you think you have a Star Trek friend who would like this, who likes to hear us bitch about Una, or hear me bitch about Una,
or is really into Law and Order, you know.
But yeah, share it with a friend. Share it with a friend. It'd be helpful for us.
Yeah, I mean, wherever you're receiving this, you can just go up to that share and share it anywhere with a friend on one of the social media platforms. Just share.
Yeah.
Sharing is caring.
Share. Sharing is caring.
Do you think anyone has ever done the build up to the pun when they realize that these two people are the same person and they're like, oh my gosh, Sharon is Karen? Like, do you think that's anywhere?
I don't know. All I think of is Finkel is Einhorn.
I know, me too. Yeah.
Einhorn is Finkel.
Maybe we should start saying that instead of sharing is caring.
Finkel is Einhorn.
Yeah.
The problem is it's kind of not a nice thing.
Anymore,
like if you think
right.
about,
Yeah.
you know, like that would never be made today.
Right.
But it's one of the most hilarious Jim Carrey montages ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole thing is fine. His reaction to the realization is where the problem lies.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Didn't see it coming, I guess, when I was watching it as a 12-year-old.
Right. No. Yeah.
No. But boy, hilarious when he starts using that plunger on his mouth.
I think my favorite thing is that he has literally a pack full of gum in his mouth.
He just keeps chewing.
You know?
And then he decides to take out the gum and neatly save it in the wrapper.
Right.
And it's a golf ball sized ball of gum.
Yeah.
What were we talking about?
Oh man. Sharing is caring, sharing, and the 90s feel good.
Yeah. It did not land for me. It felt like this was a moment of acceptance by Una from her crewmates, which she already had.
Right.
And never was without. right?
Yeah, and that's fair. Well, I mean, and they even had that at the end where they, they're like, if you could describe her in one word, I don't even know if that was asked, but they're like Starfleet, family, a friend.
Right. Actually, it would be great if from now on they were dicks to her.
Can't believe you made me do that.
Yeah.
Well, and so that is
embarrassing.
kind of something that happened with La'an and Una in the first season, and they kind of brought it up. I'm very curious to see if there is any kind of enhancement that La'an has because of her ancestry. But when the crew discovered that she was Illyrian, La'an was pretty mad about it. And in this episode, they kind of said like she should have been able to trust me with it, especially with what my bloodline is.
Right.
So that's kind of where that was coming from, like almost like La'an was trying to atone for that behavior, which is why she was digging so deep. But yeah, it is going back to that. It is frustrating that there were things that were explicitly spelled out, and then there were things that were just loose allegory, which I feel like could have been applied to many things, which I feel is what Star Trek does very well. But then in that allegory, they just really beat that allegory over our heads with it.
Over and over and over again.
And over. And I mean, again, like jumping around, they really couldn't decide which closing speech they wanted Neera to give, so they just gave her all of them.
Yeah, totally.
Like there were at least 5.
Yeah. And they were well written, and she performed them well.
Yes.
There were, right? But there were just too many. We got it.
Way too many.
And it didn't seem as though the 3 people, the judges or whatever they were, the council, were particularly receptive. It seemed like they had ulterior motives to bury Una. It's like, we hate her.
Yeah.
Which maybe was the point. I mean, there wasn't a lot of finesse to it. It didn't feel like, if you watch Measure of an Episode, you listen to this podcast, share it with a friend. If you watch Measure of a Man, that has so much more finesse to it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they couldn't have had Pike be the lawyer, the stand-in lawyer against Una, right? Because they've already done that. They already did that.
Yeah.
So
I mean, they kind of did the next best thing of having somebody who hates her be her defending attorney.
Yeah, it just felt like this was the last act of a movie building up all of these different characters, culminating in why they are acting this way. And I understood that the Vulcan is the Vulcan, so we already have context for that they're all the same character. They all are the same people. Like, it was funny that when the doctor and, I can't remember her name. Who's the helmsman?
Oh, man.
Omen?
Norman? Yeoman?
Norman? Whatever her name is. They're sitting and watching Spock and the other lawyer guy have a conversation. He's like, no, this is a very tense conversation. And he walks over. He's like, I'm sorry I flew off the handle like that.
Ortegas.
Never see that again. Yeah, thank you. And it was supposed to be a funny moment, except the previous episode, Spock literally flies off the handle several times and is showing much more emotion than in that moment.
Right, that's a good point. Well, and the other part of it too was, I mean, maybe he just saw his friends from across the way and he just wanted to go over and kind of explain what happened. But why did he walk over to their table and apologize for that behavior? Like, were they the only 2 of his kind of lateral crew that he felt he needed to go talk to? Like, did he scan the room and see if there were any other crew members that he needed to go apologize to?
Well, were they on the Enterprise?
I thought they were.
I thought they were just in a random bar on the space station or something like that. It was unclear. As beautiful as this show is, I have a hard time getting my bearings because almost every locale kind of has the same design.
That's true.
So it could have very well been the Enterprise, and that's why it felt that way. But I thought that they were on the surface. I don't know why that lawyer would have come up to the Enterprise to have a drink with Spock,
Right.
But yeah, it was meant to be a joke.
It was, yeah.
That the doctor punches in for us, because he starts laughing. It would have been better if he didn't laugh.
Uh-huh.
But because he never laughs, he seems very stoic, the doctor, I don't know, this whole episode just felt like it was out of order. It felt like, I don't know, like, am I getting this wrong?
Yeah, maybe. I think part of it also is that they are wanting more payoff for these characters than they've earned so far. And so,
Yeah.
so it really doesn't matter what order they put them in. I still think that this episode and this show is written far better than Picard. I think that, the characters are handled better. I feel like maybe the Nero Ortega's conversations, was it Ortega's? No, it was Lon. The Nero Lon conversations could have been edited like one or two more times, but I feel like the writers of this show are kind of showboating a little bit, of just kind of like having these payoff moments for these characters, which being Star fans is fine in general, but we don't know these characters well enough for these moments to hit as well as I think that they're supposed to.
I think that the writing is much more casual. This is supposed to be a fun show. Picard is not.
Sure.
Clearly.
Right.
Because nobody has fun watching that show. But this is supposed to be very happy-go-lucky. It's supposed to be like Pike's attitude is a good microcosm of the tone of the show.
Mm-hmm.
He's just kind of casual and snarky and kind of, he's always smirking and he's very suave.
Yes.
And swaggery. And that's the show. And I appreciate that. The problem with it is I feel like it undercuts the fact that it's Star Trek, because I don't think ever in any next gen, or even probably in Voyager it happens once or twice, but where there's a scene where everybody's clapping for somebody as they beam away.
That was a weird moment.
So weird, dude. It felt like she had been on the ship for years. Yeah. And she was a dick to everybody. And then finally, she did something right, and everybody claps for her.
Yeah.
That never happened. Like, that never happens on Star Trek.
Right. Well, it's just kind of strange that there wasn't a lead into it, Like, she's kind of being very, very formal, very respectful. I could see the applause if there had been kind of one person to say thank you first. Like one person tells her thank you just as she's getting up onto the platform, and then other people say, kind of the same thing. Yes, thank you. And from there it goes into an applause. But
yeah, you do the Wizard of Oz ending, and you too, Scarecrow, I'll miss you the most of all.
Right.
That kind of thing.
That was the Neelix ending as well.
Yeah. That's actually, I would have preferred that in some way, where they all have individual moments with her as she's leaving. But when in life does that ever happen, really? Where you're not at some formal event that someone is just leaving to get in their car and you start clapping for them, like, regardless of what they may have done. Obviously she did a very nice thing for Una, but it just feels like, I just feel so awkward, because I can see the awkwardness in the actors when they say, okay, now you have to clap and cheer.
Right.
Over and over and over again. And it just must feel so weird. It must feel so just cringy.
Well, and even in real life, it's so awkward when there's any kind of like pause between you leaving and people acknowledging people acknowledging what you did. You're like, okay, I'm gonna stand here and listen to, I'm gonna make eye contact with a couple of you clapping at me. This is
it would have been great if they were all clapping and cheering for her, and she gets on the thing and she says, engage. And he's like, sir, we will not be in range for another 15 minutes.
And everybody keeps kind of looking at each other, being like, okay, do we keep clapping?
Yeah, just keep this up for 15 minutes. I'm not doing that.
Right. Yeah. She's kind of,
so it just felt a little glib to me. I felt like they could put in a little bit more nuance into the writing and perhaps the allegory. I'm okay with allegory. As you said, it is a Star Trek.
It was the point of Star Trek. That's what Gene Roddenberry wanted it to be. As an allegory.
It's a staple.
Yeah.
So I'm not opposed to it. I just felt like you didn't need to hit us over the head with it.
No. Well, what I liked about this allegory was that it was kind of just about oppression. It wasn't about the LGBTQ plus community. It wasn't about African Americans. It wasn't about the Asian Americans or, any kind of specific group. It was just about oppression and how easy it is to look the other way almost. And so having that level of reflection to society, I thought was great. But then just how much more they got into how the oppression was, and and when you're dealing with a fictional group like this, and you are talking about how detailed the oppression is, like we get it, like we know what oppression is. It doesn't need to be this heavy-handed.
Yeah, I think they concentrated on the details of Una because they felt that it would make her more sympathetic or make us more sympathetic to her, which they didn't need to do because we're already sympathetic to her because everybody else is sympathetic to
Right.
her. You don't need to do that. You don't need us on board when everybody else is on
Well,
board.
and she plays a sympathetic character.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what they should have done, which they just barely grazed over, which was the reason why they have this anti-genetic modification. Because I was thinking, well, wait a minute. So you're telling me that they haven't obliterated Huntington's disease and Parkinson's disease and cancer through, like you're telling me that they haven't edited those things out at this, that those remain that in
Right,
the year 24th century.
Yeah.
So that was unbelievable. And then I was thinking, okay, so why then? Why do they have it? And then she briefly said, well, in this moment, we're going to let you off. But in general, we're still kind of against genetic modification because of the genetics wars or whatever they
The
call
eugenics
them.
war, yeah.
Eugenics war. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. Why don't you expand on that a little bit? Because, the fact that you're not just bigots, that you actually have a reason for being anti-genetics. What does that mean? And it was just one line that was just sort of danced over a little bit. That would have been interesting. Why don't you have somebody advocate for that? Maybe that would have been better for the Vulcan to mention, the Vulcan lawyer,
Right.
Instead of him just being somebody we're supposed to hate.
Well,
right.
And I actually thought that he was going to kind of be on La'an's side in his cold, unemotional manner, insofar as saying, like, we can't worry about emotion, we have to worry about facts, and kind of getting the courtroom to recognize that, yes, even factually, this case should be dismissed. That's where that's what I thought he was trying to do, and not just being, a TV villain.
Yeah, he was a mustache twirling villain.
Yeah.
And they subverted their opportunity to have somebody they set up as just being someone we're supposed to hate, and maybe have him come around.
Right.
And have him say, never mind, you're right, and then leave, right? Because logically you would probably come around to that, considering the arguments. Anyway, it would have been better. That would have been better because they set him up, like, if you're going to bring him so far to one side of, gosh, we really hate this guy.
Yeah.
Swing him over.
Right.
That'd have been an interesting twist.
Yeah. It was interesting too because of how heavy-handed it was and how much everything was spelled out. We had just had the interrogation with Una, and then Nira brings out the asylum regulation, and with each requirement for asylum, they flash back to Una's lines, and I think that was unnecessary, insofar as Nira could have just said, Una has met all of these requirements.
Right. And that just came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like in the ideas where she has what's her name read the statute, and Una's just sitting there like, yeah, oh, okay, yeah, that works. Yeah, I was asking for asylum.
Right.
Yes. It's like kind of the same situation as, he's my son. Yes,
right.
He's my son. Same thing.
And it is one of those things where if she is quacking like a duck and she looks like a duck, does she really need to say that she is a duck? Like, if she has said that she was asking for help, and she was asking for help for the reasons that require asylum, does she really need to say, I am seeking asylum and I was seeking asylum 15 years ago when I joined Starfleet?
If that had been seeded in some way in previous episodes,
Mhm.
that'd have been great. That would have made a lot more sense.
That would have
But it
been
just
kind of
comes out
nice
of
if there
nowhere.
was some episode in season 1 where, or even in the last episode. I mean, that might be. I don't really like when they're set up in the previous episode to pay off in the later episode, but I like even less when there's no setup.
Yeah.
But just in some previous episode where they gave those same descriptions. You know, I feared for my life, something something. I'm asking the Federation to help us. You know, and then Pike says, "What you're seeking is asylum," you know, or something like that.
Yeah, the problem is nothing was seeded.
Right.
Everything was delivered to us in this
episode, including her friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just my modern aesthetic that I want in a show. I want there to be context for the stuff. I don't like it coming in where you just came from watching Smallville and you want to check in half an hour later
Right.
into this and be okay. Are people going to get that reference? Are you and I the only people who understand what's going on with that reference?
I mean, fewer and fewer people will get that reference. It's true. Let us know. Like, do you understand what we mean when you when we say?
Because we're not going to tell you. We're going to keep that to ourselves.
It's in a previous episode of ours. You know, if they want to.
I know, but we don't. I don't think we ever spell it out, do we?
I think we do. I think we do.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
You have to go searching through all the other 139 other episodes.
We have over 150 now.
That's true.
Yeah, just some of them aren't numbered.
Well, okay. So, what did you like about this episode? I have to know. I'm not being sarcastic. I want to know what you liked.
No. I thought that a lot of the courtroom scenes. I agree with everything you're saying, but I think that the dialogue and the interrogations and just the general investigation of things was written well enough for me to stay interested, as opposed to the Picard things where I feel like they are spoon feeding the audience and they're providing unnecessary information. I think this episode provided too much necessary information, but they wanted to keep it encapsulated. But Picard provides too much information of things that are irrelevant.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I will agree. This is a well-written episode in the sense of they accomplished everything they needed to accomplish to get to from the beginning to the end. Right. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like Picard gets there. At least not as well. I feel like this third season isn't terrible of Picard.
But in just using that dialogue scene with Picard and Jack when he's in the brig and any of the courtroom scenes here, I was more interested in what the courtroom scene had to say than the dialogue between Jean-Luc and Jack.
Right. And one more gripe I have maybe with this particular episode is that there was never a point where I thought to myself, oh, the prosecution has a point.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's an example or a characteristic of good writing where it's not so cut and dry who the good guy and bad guy are.
Right.
Where you're just sitting there waiting for something to happen that you disagree with, or that it's like they could have been very easy, especially when they set up this kind of very astute Vulcan type of person where Spock is at odds with him, and there's a reason for that, which we don't really get any information about. Maybe we'll get that later. But it would have been nice if they said something, and maybe that's supposed to happen when they say, it doesn't matter what your emotional attachment is to this person. She broke the law.
Right.
She lied, But not even, she lied. They said that she lied because she was afraid for her life, basically.
Right.
She was afraid that you should be persecuted. So not even then. Like, there wasn't a moment where you're thinking, he's got a point there.
Yeah.
Well,
and it was interesting too, because maybe military court is different, but there wasn't really a whole lot of prosecuting evidence. They were just, this is the situation and this is the law. She broke the law, so now she has to defend herself. Like, there wasn't, again, going to court procedural shows like Law and Order, there's both sides and the jury has to make the choice, and Pasalk, that's the Vulcan prosecutor, maybe that is his whole point. Like, we don't need to provide any evidence. The evidence is her existence and she's in Starfleet. Like, that is breaking the law. Why are we even having this trial?
I guess one of the biggest demerits, biggest caveats of this episode is the lawyer, whose name is Nira.
Mm-hmm.
Nira. She asks for the book of statutes, whatever she asks for, the uniform code.
And she's given a book.
Which I thought, that's where I'm going. It's like, oh, she's getting, you want to know what we have to wear on the ship? I don't see how that's relevant. Yeah, she brings her this giant book. I'm like, what?
Right.
Why are you bringing her a book? Why did you just Bluetooth, like email it to her, you know?
You actually having this conversation, I'd have to check the original series, but that might be why. Like they might have had books in the original series and they're trying to like plus up the appearance of the technology, but not advance the technology beyond what was in the original series.
I guess they didn't have those pads, although she had a little laptop that Nira brought with her. She pulled out a laptop out of her bag.
Right.
She was going to sit at Una's desk. Una's opulent, gigantic quarters. Like, I feel like if they're trying to have some verisimilitude between the original series and this show, if you look at the original series, not all of the weird 60s aesthetic aside, but just how gigantic the quarters are.
Yeah.
And how just everything is just so luxurious and everything.
What I would love to see, and I was thinking about this with this episode, what I would love to see is them kind of do a wink and a nod to that, where somebody does go into their quarters and it does look that condensed and restrained. And then they go through a door or they go through an archway or a hallway and they find like the rest of their, manor-like quarters.
I want Ortega to go and it's just a small 5x5 room with a trash can and a bed, right?
Well, yeah, and same thing. Like, here's the captain in his quarters, which is already far more Giganda than what Picard's quarters were. But
Right.
And then on Picard, they're like, sorry, we couldn't, accommodate you with better on such short notice. And they're in like a 3x6 room that has a bunk
They're in
bed.
a bunk.
Yeah.
It's like a bunk. It's like a normal kind of what you would come to expect a military barracks to look like.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. There's clearly some level of sway between the room sizes. Like you can tell
Absolutely.
right away the ranking. Well, not even, I guess.
Well, yeah.
Like if the admiral is staying in a bunk barracks, like.
Yeah, I want to know where we haven't really seen yet where just the normal crew, what their barracks are like. I don't think we have in Strange New Worlds, have we?
No, we've seen it on lower decks very much, frequently and often.
And they're in bunks. It's like a hallway. It's not even a room.
Yeah. Right.
Which maybe they'll bring over.
No privacy.
Yeah. Which I'm fine with. It's like a military type of operation, even though it's not military.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I know what people are going to say about at least my gripes, which is stop comparing it to old Star Trek. I get it.
Right.
Stop doing that. We get it. It's not the old Star Trek. That's a stale argument. It's a stale complaint. Shut up already. But you know what? This is the stuff that we care about. If you're going to say Star Trek on the show, if it's going to say Star Trek and you're going to reference all the Star Trek stuff that has already happened or is going to happen, then I feel like I have license to complain about it. If you're going to say, hey, we are Star Trek, and then do things that aren't Star Trek, or I'm not saying like, oh, this isn't next gen, F you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, hey, you are trying to operate in a universe that is well established, perhaps the most established of any of the big franchises. Even more than Star Wars, way more than Star Wars.
Sure.
Right? The one thing that Star Wars has over Star Trek is all of the Disney park stuff, which is amazing.
Yes.
Amazing. They have that over it, hands down. Anyway, point being is that if you're going to operate in the universe, follow the goddamn rules.
I think that we are, first and foremost, we are establishing the criteria that makes proper Star Trek. So whether or not we like the episode is irrelevant. We can argue the subjectivity of it all day, but we are saying you cannot argue that this criteria makes it a proper Star Trek, and if it checks off those boxes, it's proper. If it doesn't, it's not. And you may think it's the best episode ever. If there's no sci-fi in it, it's not proper Star Trek. But I think after that, like we we are looking at these episodes trying to say like, this is where they missed the mark. Like Voyager, for example. Like Voyager has so many missed opportunities. I think every episode we've ever analyzed of them, they have these moments where it's like that's what the episode should have focused on. Or like the episode with Scotty, Relics. Like they have a Dyson sphere in that episode, and it's just a plot device. Like they do nothing to
Right.
explore it. So I think that's what we are saying about these things. We don't dislike Star Trek. We love Star Trek, but we love Star Trek for those things when they are explored, and we get so disappointed and frustrated when they introduce those things without ever exploring them again.
Well, and they label it as Star Trek. So if it's going to not be Star Trek, that's kind of a peeve of mine,
Sure.
It's like when they make an Indiana Jones movie and there's just some old dude in it.
Pretending to be his father.
I haven't seen the movie yet. I have no idea what happens. I've heard the album, though, which may or may not be promising. I don't know. Promising for the movie, I mean.
Right. So what do you think? Proper Star Trek?
Well, here's the thing.
Okay.
Is that the one bit of science fiction I feel is when he's wearing a mask walking around this planet. Pike is wearing a mask because they set up that humans cannot exist, maybe subsist too, in this atmosphere because it's too toxic.
Right.
And I felt like, that's interesting. Tell me more. They didn't. And they didn't tell me more about that. But I think this may be the first time.
It is not a Class M planet.
Is it not? I don't know. I mean, they didn't go into that.
Well, it can't be because they can't survive down there.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like just polluted or if it's like Pandora where you literally can't exist, like there's no oxygen type of thing.
Well, he did say like the planet is the planet's air is toxic to humans. I guess that's kind of the extent of it.
I mean, it could just have too much carbon dioxide in it. Who knows what that means? But I felt like this is the first time that a character has just casually had to wear a mask on a planet.
Mm-hmm.
Have they done that before ever?
I don't think so. Aside from like everybody having to wear a suit when there. But that's usually on another ship. That hasn't been on a planet.
Right. That's to protect from the vacuum of space or something like that.
Right.
But I don't think anybody's ever had to wear a mask like that. I liked it. Maybe have been a first. That is science fiction and unique and novel.
But was it explored?
No, not at all.
No. Yeah.
It just was something that happened. I mean, I guess it was slightly explored where, I mean, they could have just had him wearing a mask. I mean, would that have been better? I guess we would have done the math that the air is toxic to humans. we can get there on that. I would have liked to have known.
Right. But he did not have like, I mean, he had this little iPod that was managing to convert it, and it didn't look like it was connected to his mask.
I thought I thought that was where the hose was, maybe. Okay. By the way, I can't believe they bring iPods back in the future.
But this is my point. Like it's a super small device. There's no way it can contain enough compressed air to last him for as long as it did.
Right.
So maybe it's some kind of air filter as well, and it can only filter for so long. So that means there's oxygen in the air.
Yeah. But I don't think they thought about it enough to really. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. So you're right. It wasn't explored, really.
Yeah. It was more of a magical device without the tank than an actual sci-fi.
I mean, they took it was the right direction, though. So don't just have it be another planet that anybody can walk around on.
Yeah.
Right? It was a good, that was kind of an exploration of who these people are, that they are, they can kind of go anywhere and have all of these mods or whatever they call them, genetic enhancements.
See, right. And the other part to that too is, and then they completely dismiss it by putting him in a room where they shove all the oxygen in. Like, it would have been great if he was at 2% or something like that, and they were worried and they said, okay, we'll have an emergency meeting with you, or he's at 5% or something, and he's like, I'm not going anywhere. You will have to beam me out or whatever. And they're, finally they're like, okay, you have until your tank is at 1%. And then, and then we'll kick you out, or something like that. And he goes in while his tank's at like 3%. And after the secretary leaves and the lawyer says, start talking, he switches out the tanks and he's at 100%.
Right. I think maybe here's an alternate theory for that. So he's walking toward, they show him outside first, right? And they show him with the mask on, and he has to kind of take a break. He puts his hand up against the building and he's trying to catch his breath, right? My theory is that the atmospheric pressure is less than it is on Earth. And so that's why he was getting lightheaded, is that it was sort of supplemental. It was more of a pressure device than it was a oxygen device. And so, and it's kind of underlined by when he goes into the office and she kind of pressurizes the room, because you don't just add oxygen to a room, because that would make your ears explode. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe they were creating more pressure so he could in fact breathe enough. Right. So they brought the atmosphere down from maybe it was 50,000 feet on Earth down to 10,000 feet. And that's why he was able to kind of catch his breath and that kind of thing. But I'm doing a lot of work for them.
Right.
I should get paid.
I mean, we should get paid for the amount of work that we do for these episodes.
Yeah, you're right.
Our other slogan is, but they didn't do that.
Hey, and that's going to go on a t-shirt that you can buy, everybody. So look for that. That's coming.
Again, I liked it. Apparently you didn't, but it was not proper Star Trek.
No, definitely not. Okay, well, we can mark that down.
Yep.
Normally they are on the show.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been pretty good. But today was a no, yes, no.
Yeah. All right, what are we watching tomorrow?
Picard, episode 3. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've been Paul.
I've been Jonathan.
And this has been The Measure of an Episode.
But you already knew that.
Picard.